Material for the brain. Conversations for thinking bodies. Hello and welcome to Material for the Brain podcast. My guest for today's episode is Nita Little, a dance pioneer whose work had an international impact and changed the course of dance history. Nita is a performer, teacher, choreographer, scholar, and a theorist. She is one of the founders of Contact Improvisation, and in the last 50 years has been touring the globe to teach and share her research on what she calls relational intelligence. Nita holds a PhD in performance studies, and her writing investigates ecological action of tactile attention and the creative potential present in entangled relations. In 2016, she initiated a global project, the Institute for the Study of Somatic Communication, which is populated by dance researchers working in ensembles together with researchers from a variety of science and humanity-based disciplines. I met Nita in 2014 at the Austrian Contact Festival. I was very impressed by her genuine interest in research and discovery, which was especially impressive due to the fact that she's already been doing it for so many years. Since then, I have met her on several occasions and have always enjoyed conversing and sharing studio time with her. It was such an honor to speak to Nita, since the legacy of her work had such a profound effect on my life. Having the opportunity to share more time with her was very special for me, and I hope that you would appreciate the conversation we had. Hello, Nita. Welcome to my podcast. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you, Matan. It's nice to see you.
It's really nice to see you, and I'm very honored by the fact that you joined me here. It's really great to host you.
Thank you.
And I'm so excited of having this conversation that I have a bit of a faster heartbeat. A moment of honesty. How's it going? Where are you? What are you doing now? How life with all this craziness that we are all going through?
The COVID moment. It's a really interesting time. I am personally, I live north of Seattle, so that's where I'm speaking from. I am working. I'm doing a lot of work online. I'm doing two kinds of work. One is teaching online. So I have a class that I call relational intelligence at home. When I was doing a lot of touring prior to COVID, I was teaching workshops often on relational intelligence. Others were on rewilding attention. Other, things that were asking people to really deeply consider what they were doing when they're moving. These are movement courses, always movement, always about relationship, always about how are you being a human being? What does it mean to you? And they are based in contact. So yeah, we can't do contact with one another so much, but we can sure do contact with our worlds. Actually, one of the more recent classes I was teaching was a co-teaching at Impulsdance with Kerstin Kusmal, and we taught a class called also dancing, intimacy with the inhuman. So we were thinking about how is it that we are human and non-human and inhuman, all of those variations, more than human. And that really was a great setup for stepping into this moment. So,
what was it before this co-teaching
it was a year and a half before COVID hit.
Okay.
So
it was in present. It was not online, because it immediately provoked me to think that it was some kind of a reaction to, the non-human. I'm thinking about us communicating through this non-human
No, I've been really interested
interface.
in the more than human, and in our relations, environmentally, our relations with other humans, our relations with our worlds, and now with our intimate worlds, the worlds in which we live, the houses, the places, the objects, the landscapes. So these things are really interesting to me. And in terms of the human to human relationship, I have always been very interested in the mind. So I'm kind of in this COVID moment reawakening my coaching, which I did a lot of before getting a PhD. And I wanted to go back to look at that element of what is it that the mind does that creates our reality? Because understanding that helps me to understand a great deal about how we compose the human. And so I've been getting back into that material. It's really thrilling. Doing coaching is so fun. So that's also helping me survive this non-touring, non-dancing moment. Staying intimate with people, really deeply intimate with people.
It sounds good, like, to keep oneself busy, and yeah, I mean, you already provoked so many things from this, just few things that you've shared. But before we dive into your work and to many things that I want to discuss with you, for the sake of including also some people who are listening that maybe are a bit less familiar with who you are and what have you been doing in the last, I don't know how many years, but many years. Could you maybe share a little bit, your history, the kind of significant moment that brought you to the present moment?
Surely. So I was a little girl who knew she was a dancer when I was like 5 years old, 4 years old, 3 years old. I don't know. I was always dancing. And then when I was I think I was 11 or 12, I insisted on going to a dance camp, which I did during the summers. And there I knew for certain that I was a dancer. I wrote my grandfather and sobbing that I was not a normal person, that I was a dancer. And then I went to college for dance. I worked with Jose Limon actually during summers, and with some extraordinary people from Graham, from Limon, from Cunningham, and so I had, as a modern dancer, and that was my trajectory. As a modern dancer, I had fabulous training. Then I went to college and continued fabulous training, working with Judith Dunn, and who was married to Robert Dunn, who is one of the very, very important kind of postmodern people involved in Judson, the Judson Church Project, which, if anyone knows dance history, is a really key moment. And of turning from modernism into postmodernism, which we now seem to be continuing but edging out of. And then when I was in college, I met Steve Paxton, and this was prior to Contact Improvisation, that dance form that now has taken over the world and really invested itself into almost all dance forms, Western-based dance forms. I'm talking about ballet and contemporary dance and modern dance forms. All of these dance forms are inclusive of Contact Improvisation, the materials, the understanding, the gender balance, the physicality of females acting with males. All of that really was profoundly influenced by Contact Improv. Also influenced by Pilobolus, which was a very different, which was visually provoked. Contact is at that time was really movement provoked, not a visual form. And it never really became a really fabulous visual form. Why? Because we're invested in this information that is an exchange between dancers, which is an interiority. So in many ways, the best audience, and I'm quoting now a professor of mine, Lynette Hunter, when I was getting my PhD maybe 10 years ago, she said something that was right on the mark, which is the best audience for contact improvisation is the dancer. The dancers themselves, they are deeply immersed and understand what's happening and what is so extraordinarily beautiful in each moment. The viewers are looking at amazing movement, but it's within the interiority that extraordinary things are happening, which is a good reason for people to dance. Because it's on the extraordinary action is on the inside. So anyway, so then I met Steve prior to Contact, and we got into, I won't go through all of that history, but from that meeting, we ended up going to working on pre-Contact, and then eventually in that time Contact got its name, and then we taught it to people at the at the John Weber Gallery in New York, and we started touring it, people started picking it up, and it started to have a life of its own. And in that life, Nancy Stark-Smith was a part of our touring, and she started the Quarterly. And the Quarterly helped connect people. It was a fabulous tool for all of us becoming a web. So, and then I spent years of running around teaching and touring. Then I had a family. Then I went. Then I had always, since the early days, been interested. I mean, when at Bennington College, when I was working initially with Steve, I was very interested in the relationship between the mind and the body, and how it was what we were paying attention to really mattered in terms of what we could do and what we got. Because I was a modern dancer, and my attention in modern dance was really embodied attention, was totally different than in Contact. And I initially had to resolve these two issues, the mind that could do Contact and the mind that could do contemporary dance. Not the same. How does it work? And it took me probably 10 years to figure out, but it awoke this whole understanding in me that that then penetrated the rest of my life, caused me to have to go to get a PhD, because I had learned so much from dancing. I mean, dancing had taught me so much that wasn't present in the culture as knowledge, that I felt as though I should learn what else was known so I could communicate to people well. And got the PhD, I guess about 8 years ago, I got that PhD. And now I continue with joy touring as I have for many years, and teaching, making work. I'm a choreographer as well as one of the classes I'm teaching right now is on composing Emergence. It's a composition class for dancers, and it's really exciting because it's really looking at how do you create emergence? How do you provoke what you don't know to emerge and to become something tangible, something you can work with, and doing that in composition. It's great. So that not thinking of composition as just a making, everything is made, any more than you think of a contact improv dance as a making. It's an emerging. And contact is an emergence between two people. It's provoked by relationship. Same with composition.
First, I must tell you one feedback. It's so exciting to see how excited you are about the things you're doing. And that's something that I think we met first time in the Austrian Contact Improvisation Festival.
Yeah.
That I was part of the organizational team in that year. And that's what struck me the most with you. I think that for some people it was a little bit even shocking to see how energetic and excited you are, because I think there is something that many people who are nowadays attracted to contact improvisation are looking for this kind of ease and I would say almost sometimes numb.
Oh, God.
Like this
mellow,
for me.
Mellow.
Yeah, like cuddly, comfortable, laid back, non-effort, and suddenly to see somebody who's their energy in the room is a little bit like popcorn was for me was super exciting, and I was so happy to actually attend your classes and to get to learn from you and to know. And so this is like what I'm also experiencing now, even through the medium of verbal conversation with you, and that's amazing.
Well, I have to tell you, I was raised with two brothers. And we were physically fighting all the time. I mean, on the floor, thrashing,
Who was the older one?
I was in the middle.
Okay.
An older brother and a younger brother. So, I had to be physically ready. And that has a lot to do with my relationship with contact improvisation. So when I first met Steve, Steve said, well, let me take you into a studio and show you how not to get bruised. Because, of course, I was dancing. I was doing a dance piece. I had composed something with a male dancer, a young guy who didn't really do much dance, who was new to dancing. And I was getting, I was doing things I didn't physically yet know how to do. So I was getting bruised all over. So, and those early days of contact, we didn't know what we were doing. We were throwing ourselves into the air and, without hardly even a prayer to say, where's this going to go? But with the belief that we would be able to resolve it somehow. And that has a lot to do with what we're going to be talking about right now. Yesterday, I just taught a class that it was so exciting to me. It was so provocative to me. And the class was on the relationship between the conscious and the subconscious when you're moving, when you're dancing, when you're doing what you're doing. And that being able to feel that edge of between what you know and what you could be coming to know, but what you already know in the subconscious. But you don't know it. You don't know it consciously, and how critical it is for us as dancers, and perhaps as people living in a world. I'm just going to put that out. That for us to understand that edge, and to empower, to give authority to our subconscious to move, to be able to move our bodies, the subconscious can move me. When I'm dancing contact and I'm doing fast work, I give great authority to my subconscious. And guess what? It works. So that's where the popcorn
I can identify with that. Yeah, I love the popcorn. I want to start asking you some things that I'm interested addressing in this format that we are sharing.
Sure.
And one thing that I'm interested is that when I met you, and also when I was going through some text that you've been sending me, there was a word that caught my attention describing contact improvisation as a research into practice.
Okay. Yeah.
I hope I pronounced it correct.
Absolutely.
And for me, that's something that was kind of very clear when I studied contact improvisation, because I felt that you cannot study it without research quality into your investigation. It's not it's not information that you just pile. It's something that you really need to have an attentive mind to actually understand. And on the other hand, and this is something that always blows my mind, that now, like you guys did this wild experimentation there, and now there is all these this festival where people sell contact pens, and that was coming out of some kind of artistic research. And and I've heard one teacher that I wouldn't name here that told me in relation to you, yeah, Nita is not really teaching contact improvisation. So there is this process of codification of what contact should be, or what is the real contact, or all this kind of conversation that I'm not so much interested in, because for me, contact was always, my question about contact was what contact can become versus like, how can I preserve what contact was?
Right.
What is your stand in relation to that?
Well, I'm probably one of the most persistent, consistent contact improv teachers that believes absolutely, that understands, that comes from what the core values of contact are. And so all my work comes from those core values.
And what are those core values?
Well, you mentioned research. I just wrote a paper, I think I sent it to you, on the fact that inquiry into what this is, that we can do when we are in contact, when we are connected, when we are physically involved, what that can be requires research. There are people right now who teach contact as a series of pathways. They teach people to do it this way and that way, and if you do this kind of role, then you do it in this particular way with this person, and that is not really contact. Contact, in fact, in the early inquiry of contact, we would say, that's a number 52. We would give numbers to things that were repeated, pathways that were repeated, with the intention of not becoming highly skillful at those pathways, but with the intention of realizing we had just repeated ourselves. And why repeat? Because we were interested in what could not be repeated. What did you have to find that you had never found before? And to do that, you had to inquire. And so that value of repetition is actually not contact. Not as we initially did it, performed it, produced it, and taught it for many years. So of course, in the teaching of what contact was, we had to teach how to inquire. And when there are people teaching contact without that element of deep research and understanding, not only in a general sense, but in the very specific sense of a millisecond of inquiry, you're in a dance and your mind is asking. You're attending to what is known and what is not known, what is not understood yet. And you're highlighting the what's not known, not just the what is known.
Okay, I have a short follow-up question, because I love contact, but I think I've never identified myself so much with the form for many reasons, and I've also always kept myself exposed to different ways of teaching movement, and one similar word that I've been quite busy with is the word of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, that similarly to contact improvisation is a form where is a martial art, so there is conflict. It's not a collaboration.
Right.
I mean, of course, it is a collaboration, but the collaboration is about conflict. But the premises is very similar. We use physical touch in order to manipulate, control, and inhibit movement, which I would say is like kind of the opposite application of what is happening in contact.
Exactly.
And of course, in Jiu-Jitsu, repetition is highly valued because you want to become as sufficient and clear with your techniques. And so I wonder, when you were saying about that the spirit is not to repeat, so what is it there for you? Why do you have this quest, or why did you have this quest?
So let me give you a little bit of background, okay? Because this is history. This is dance history I'm giving you. Steve was a member of a dance company that included Yvonne Rainer and Trisha Brown and all of these, these dance greats. And that company, the Grand Union, was the first dance improvisation company. And its whole project was to not repeat anything. And it was very controversial because dance was supposed to be about excellence and being able to repeat something with perfection at that point. That wasn't their interest at all. They had a completely different interest about dance. So we go into contact improvisation. Here, this value starts to show up in contact improvisation. When you have that value, what you start to understand is there is so much that is not understood yet. That you are constantly entering new territory that has not been spoken of, not been understood yet. That provokes possibilities that have not yet been revealed. So it's an act of revelation. So what I love about contact and the value that I have with contact improvisation is not that I can, when I'm dancing with you, Matan, not that I can cue you that we could do this particular cool move. And then we do the cool move. It's not a whole interior set of cueing that's happening between two people. It is a conversation that is happening on a level in which, when it's really great, it is a state of communion in which I'm inside your whole physicality, so that as soon as you know something is happening, I know it's happening. You're not telling me, oh, I want to do this, because I'm faster than that. By the time you realize you want to do this, I'm already there. And why am I already there? Because I'm asking what's happening here. In Matan. What is Matan? What is this body I also am? I have not separated myself from you. I am now dancing with you, Anita Matan. I'm not Anita dancing with Matan. I have done this practice and taught my flesh to inquire. I've taught my fascia to meet your fascia and be asking, what's going on? What do I need to know that's here that is Matan's fascia? There is this deep level of inquiry that we are able to explore together, so that what emerges between you and me, some of it will probably have culturally recognized forms, but what is emerging could never emerge anywhere else, because of who you are and what your particular values are. Not just that your body is different than mine, but also that is true, but also because how we speak to each other in that interiority is very different. The spirit of Matan, the spirit of Nita are deeply entwined. They are entangled, what we use in technical words, entangled.
Interesting. And okay, so I want to speak it out loud to kind of see. So what I get from it is that what you perceive as something that is in hardcore and of that research that led you to many of other things that you've been doing is this inquiry of something that is not here yet, something that we don't know, which I would say that is kind of the essence of progressive thinking, no? Like right. I want to inquire something that I don't know yet.
Exactly.
But if we say like, look, because now that the scene has changed, no, contact is not that anymore. I mean, I would say like maybe some aspect of contact is there, but there's also a lot of other things. So if we say like, hey guys, that's not contact. Contact is this progressive thing. We are taking a conservative stance in relation to our progressive needs. And that's a little bit contradictory. And that's interesting,
no? Isn't it wonderful? I am the most, I'm in many respects, I was going to say this earlier, I'm the most conservative of all the contactors.
Yeah, of course, because you were there.
Because I was there, and because I am true to that birth. That it birthed something that now, it didn't just birth movement. It didn't just birth people moving together and touching. It didn't just birth dancers experiencing physics in an interior way and learning to move with physics, not learning to move visually. What does it look like? But how do you immerse yourself in the physics so that you are aligning with it? And that's where the movement comes from. It doesn't come from a visual place. Hey, I could do a super duper wah, right? It's deep in the physics. You throw yourself into the physics and you go, well, this is going somewhere. And it's an extraordinary joy to discover where it actually ends up. I don't dance knowing where I'm going to end up. That would bore the bejesus out of me. I am not born to repetition. I am born to disrupt repetition. Anyway, back to it. You had said something and I'm losing it. Sorry, Matan.
No, it's fine. We are not in a rush.
You said, what was the meat of your most recent question?
No, about is it important to really, in your mind, to take this conservative position in relation to the essence of contact, or is it just, or are you willing to let go and just see, okay, look, it goes somewhere else than what we intended, and that is it, and I'm not going to resist it because that's the progression of contact, even if to some extent the progression is regression from the values that you've...
So it is now a worldwide phenomenon, correct? And yet it has provoked many other marvelous things. And yes, there is regression for me in many ways. And yet, I really I have a choice to trust or to distrust. If you distrust, this is like the old thing that happened in contact, you choose to license something and regulate it and create codifications. If you're going to trust humanity, then you open it and you say, let's see where this goes. What can happen here? And that's always going to mean that if you look at water move, if you look at a stream, some of the water actually is going backwards. On the edges of that stream, it's moving backwards. It's moving opposite from the way that the stream is moving. And some of it is rushing forward. And some, so water moves differently. And so does thought, and so does this practice. And I simply have to stay true to myself and to give this kind of possibility to others when it's possible. But my purpose of living and purpose of working in dance and purpose of doing contact and anything that contact has provoked, such as my inquiry into attention, the embodiment of attention. All of that is the preference I have is to continue the inquiry, not to get caught up in the history or the politics or any of that. Doesn't interest me. I'm interested in how can I be true? Is to truth. Where's my truth with this? And my truth is in the profound excitement. Why am I excited? I'm excited because I am and always have been living in discovery of what has not yet come. And that, what a gift. I am a blessed person. It's a gift.
Yes, indeed. And it's also nice that, like, yeah, it's interesting because I think that for many people, life as a journey is about reducing the unknown variables. and yeah, I made a short solo episode about the topic of safety versus freedom, and I think that like for me, freedom is the ability to exist in the unknown versus safety, which is like the structures. Yeah,
absolutely. And that is to appreciate complexity. You have to appreciate complexity, because when you go into places that are not known, there's going to be a lot of information and you're not going to know how to put it together necessarily. But there is this deep trust that within your being, there is the knowing of how to do that. Let me return to this provocation, why I was so excited by yesterday's class. Our attention can only hold 7 to 9 bits or quanta of information in any moment. The subconscious holds all the rest, and it's huge. It's like an immense warehouse, packed with information, packed. We don't have access to it because it's subconscious, but we do have access. It's actually right here. And if you feel it right here, and you can start to trust it, it can start to work for you. If you give it authority, it starts to speak. And suddenly you have access to so much more. The subconscious is highly complex. The conscious is constantly reductive. So if you're going to deal with freedom, you have to deal with and trust the fact that you also are built to contain an immense amount, and you have access to it. The more cultured, and here's my real kick, the more culture individuates you, tells you you are alone, you are singular. The most important thing is to reduce and make it simple. The more you do that, the less freedom you will actually have, and the less free you will be. So, do we love simplicity? When an artist creates something that in one moment and in one action absolutely encapsulates something that is highly complex, that is exquisite and beautiful. But it is a reading of that huge complexity that makes it beautiful. It's not the fact that it's just simple. We do both.
Yeah, I had quite recently some experiences, and I think that it's also something that is definitely going to boom our culture in the next 10 years, I'm sure, is like the work with psychedelics that is coming back on a medical and scientific level, but also on a, this kind of underculture of ceremonies and this, and definitely I can relate from an experiential level on the power of the subconscious and what happened when you do have access to it. It's like, I felt that in one weekend I've done work of, 10 years of psychotherapy. I mean, maybe I'm exaggerating, but it was amazing, like how much I could clean from things that are not necessary and holding back. And that's something that, you've also mentioned the word that, like, singularity and your interest in contact, about coming out of that. And that's something that I can really relate to on the experiential level. And maybe it can lead us also to kind of your work on attention, is that when I'm engaged in contact improvisation, and that's something that I can identify with the differentiation between doing contact, or like, let's say, being contact, and doing contemporary dance, cueing, the type of attention. And one thing that is, I would say, is that in contact, it's not really possible not to be present and really do contact. If you're not present, there is just somebody rubbing your body. So, and
right.
yes.
You're right. You're so right. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, somebody is rubbing your body, and you're just there.
But yesterday,
but when I do choreography, when I do choreography, I think it is possible because I like to not be 100% there and still get a satisfactory result, and that's something that I'm interested to inquire with you. Like, so what do you think is the significant thing that happens within CI exchanges in relation to our attention, and also like what's the difference between attention and focus?
Earlier you said between attention and awareness. Attention and focus is an important question. Yeah. So I used to talk about the mind, but now I really very often talk about awareness. I mean, not awareness, attention, because attention requires a body and a mind. It's not possible to have attention without a body. And bodily felt attention is really profound. That's when you start to really have access to that subconscious mind. That subconscious. I mean, I will key you into if you have done psychedelics, how physical it can be. It's a physical experience. It's not just a mental experience. The mind body acts as one. And when it is acting as one, then you get a really interesting, then you start to have those fabulous insights and possibilities. So, okay, so attention, it's a big subject. It is through dancing that I became really involved in understanding what the potentials of the human are. And I realized that we as cultures are not living that potential. We are not acting on those potentials. In fact, what we think a human is highly politically determined. The politics of educating humans has been a reductive politics of how can we create humans that will go into factories and work all day. Humans that will go into certain circumstances and subjugate their better knowing to the needs of the body. How do we create humans that will do those things? How do we create humans that actually believe they are individualized and individuated, only that they are not the many? Let me tell you a story. When the colonists in the United States started to move west and started to take over Native American Indian territories, what they did was they disallowed, when they captured them, disallowed dancing in community, in whole communities, people moving together. And they didn't actually stop people from moving, from dancing. It was fine to create spectacle. Show me your greatest moves. You just can't move together. You can't move in coordinated relations. You cannot be in relations. We can look at you and see you as a beautiful mover, but you cannot do that together with others. Why? Because if I can individuate you, I can conquer you. If you function as a single body, if you can function as a multiplicity, then you're dangerous. Let me take you to what contact dancers can know. When contact dancers can move their own physical form as a multiplicity of experiences rather than as a single experience, then they can understand and experience physics in motion. Then they can start to do this extraordinary dance together. As long as they're only experiencing themselves as a singular body, then they have to do the moves. They're not getting the information from their interiority, from the very, very small. They also are. And that's Francisco Varela. I wanted to, I was looking up his name before because I wanted to tell you something that he once said, which is, he was the first person to start to really encapsulate and recognize, he was one of the first people, how incredibly important cognitive science is, the study of how we know as a physical being. And he said, it's as if bodies, which are all these mini lives, right? It's as if these bodies are composed of selfless beings that are all moving together, right? He didn't say that, but I don't have his words completely. I'm paraphrasing. And so when we work as more than one, when we experience ourselves as more than one, we start having a power we never knew we had. And that's what contact taught me. And that's why everything I do, it comes from contact. I'm interested in what is the human that is powerful, that is immersed in this dance of life, immersed with her environments, their environments. What can a human be? Because the culturally determined human is so much less. And contact was born as a political action, and it continues. Here's your politics.
Nita, can I respond for some things you said?
Please do. You just saw a hard part of me. I'm sorry, really.
No. First, I'm happy to dive in that direction as well. But you said several things that I think that, for me, they're a little bit hard to hear without respond. So first, you said I hear some kind of a critique, and I think that it's a valid critique about individuality and maybe about, let's say, neoliberal politics that are pushing towards individuality. And you also use the word manufacturing people that will So it's already that's something that I'm it's a huge discussion that maybe it's not the place to really dive for it completely, but there is a tension between culture and the nature nurture debate, and I think it's not that obvious for me that that we are just a product of what our society tells us that we are. And that's one thing that I think that is there. But the other thing that I want to point out, because I think that nowadays I see, a backlash and this attack on the notion of individuality, that, and I do want to point out that I think that it's something that I've been contemplating also a lot, and kind of came to this recent realization that first, it would be a shame to, how you say in English, to throw the baby with the baby water.
No? To throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Yeah, because I think that the biggest discovery with the notion of individuality is that, and I think that's the beauty side of it, is that each individual person has a value, and that we can value each individual person, and not disregard us as a group.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a very important thing not to. And I see that this is somehow something that many people are not really, they're willing to throw away. And what do you think about that?
I think that both are necessary. It's not one over the other, it's both. It's a continuum. And what we want is the range. But what we have right now is so highly weighted towards the individual, we don't have access to the others. It's not that one is better than the other. But what is an individual is really an incredible question. And it's one I love. And what I understand and what I'm interested in gaining are the skills to be able to be an individual, absolutely, and be a multiplicity at the same time. And what we understand, the problem with culture is culture has not offered the continuum. Culture has offered only one area of that. And I'm saying we need to open this baby up because it's too limited. And if we open it up, we will have incredible access.
Yeah, I think that with that, I can follow, and like I would really agree with you that and I mean something that have changed in me recently is this kind of the maybe that the recognition that the true power of individuality is recognizing that you're not that important, and from that base to start expanding towards others, and but that you do have a certain base of responsibility and ability to respond, and that you're not just a mere result of something that is pushing you away and you're like helpless. And I think that is something that is also very important to preserve before we completely dismantle individuality, is that we do have the capacity to respond to things. We do have the ability to shift our, or let's say, adjust our experiences. And I think that, it's maybe that's also can lead us to what you're talking about, attention, that there is some kind of a process of negotiation there. And I am active to something that I'm not in control, or I'm becoming aware to something that I'm not in control. Or I don't know, maybe you can elaborate more about that, because I think that there is a certain tension that maybe kind of can reflect about your multiplicity just within yourself.
Right. So when you hold the world always as this polarity, individual, multiple, then there is this really important negotiation that goes on. And one of the reasons why attention is so important is that attention can oscillate. It can do this and that, this and that, this and that. And so the individual can be important and not at all important. Important and not at all important. Important and not at all. And one of the things about attention that is so extraordinary is that it can do that. It can do that oscillation in a chunky way, the way I just did, important and not important. But attention can oscillate very fast too. This and that and this and that and this, and it goes faster and faster. And when it goes really fast, it becomes one thing. And now you start to have variation in possibilities, because that rhythm of this and that can go in lots and lots of different ways. It can go a little bit more this, a little bit more that, or less that. So it starts to have rhythms within it. And when it oscillates really, really fast, it becomes a whole new something. So instead of black and white, we start to have grays. Instead of yellow and green, or yellow and blue, we start to have variations of green. And then you mix in a little bit of something else, and you start to have new colors. So the notion that we are solely one thing or the other, it's, as far as I'm concerned, a dance. And the question of value is, what happens? What do you get when you do it this way? What happens when you do it that way? What do you want? How is it we have choice? And what do we want as a human race? So the possibilities, the way we describe phenomenon is determinative of what we get. Like this word responsibility. Karen Barad started calling it responsibility. Responsibility with a capital A or with a dash between those two words. Because it is that responsibility that we think of as, oh, how can I be there? How can I show up? What is needed for me to have ability here? Not just, I'm responsible for you, but what are the variations here? How is it what happens to you is happening to me? What are my possibilities? Where's freedom? Where's the complexity that gives me the most choice? So that language changes everything. In contact improvisation, if I start training you to be a self that is inclusive when you're dancing with Matan, to be inclusive of Matan as a self. So your self now is yourself and Matan. And when Matan's dancing with you, Matan becomes you to some degree. He has access to what's going on within you. In a state of communion doesn't mean that when you pull apart, you aren't separate beings. But the difference that I am becomes more informing to Matan than he can do by himself. And the same, your difference becomes a difference I am inclusive of. And when that kind of state happens, that kind of complexity happens in our relations, that means that my response ability has increased profoundly. And that means I can take better care of you, and you can take better care of me. And I have no confusion, actually. I do not get, we're not talking about a state of losing myself in Matan or giving myself to Matan so that Matan is now what is the most important thing to me. What I have simply done is extend Nita into being a greater Nita. But that is in deep and profound care, the value that I give to Nita, I have also extended wherever I go, into whatever territories I enter, for the purpose of being response-able.
I'm hearing your voice, and another point, I think, to look at the notion of individuality and this tension. And I think this maybe comes across to me because of my background, growing up in Israel, which is, a land of conflict. But I think that, like some inherited, I think, part of life is that not everything that we want happens to us. And sometimes that we come into conflict with other beings. And I think that another way to look at the emergence of the notion of individuality is survival instinct. If I'm a zebra and a panther is, or maybe I don't know if a panther, it's another continent, but if a lioness is running after me, if I don't have a notion of self, why should I run away? okay, I can just be eaten and become part of you, and it doesn't matter. I'm just,
But that's a very different kind of part of, isn't it? We're not talking the same thing. I'm not giving up my individuality when I am including when I'm dancing with you, and you are included as an aspect of Nita in my knowing. I'm not giving up Nita. There is no giving up. There is only gain. So yes, if a panther is running towards me, hopefully because I have become because let me point out, I have one exercise that I teach people, which is the difference between walking through a forest and walking as a forest. If you're walking as a forest, your ability to know the panther is there is much faster, much more immediate than if you're walking through a forest. Completely different way of gaining information, completely different bodily felt way of sensing what's happening. And the forest is giving you new information too. So your responsibility is greater. So, there's a panther that's intending to eat me. What do? Of course I run away. Of course I do not engage in being eaten. Because I can return to Nita in a flash into my skin sack and being my skin sack. But why? I might run away while also being engaged in as a forest, or as what's here, what's possible, what are the possibilities here. I just had, I have a beautiful dancer friends who have run into bears. I've got a beautiful friend who goes off into the mountains by herself for months at a time. One of those times, she was limping. She looked up, and there was a mountain lion. We have mountain lions here, or pumas. And the puma looked at her, and she looked at the puma. And they just stayed there. And she did not back off. She did not do anything. She just stayed there. Did she have a confusion about, eventually they parted ways. She did that with a bear, but the bear had food. The bear was eating. And she only had one direction she could go. She had to move past the bear because night was coming and a storm was coming, and she had no other choice. So she stood. And she did not. She filled the valley, the little or crevice, whatever it was. There was nowhere else to go. She had to move past the bear, within quite close to the bear. And eventually, what the bear ended up doing was moving up the wall a little bit to allow her to pass. So if you realize that you can embrace a situation with your whole being, and that there is communication that can happen there, not by sign language, not by what do they call it? Body language. Not by body language alone. Body language is important, but it's not going to do the whole job. The job has to be done on a much greater level if there's going to be communication. Body language is only body language. That's like me gesturing in sign language to you. It's a bigger job. It's a job. Contact improv understand it. Contactors understand that. Beautiful contactors understand the job.
Nita, I think I brought this example, not because I think that, I see, and maybe again, maybe we differ on that, but I see a distinct difference between collaborative communication and competitive communication.
Yeah, there is huge. I would agree.
And the example of the zebra is, I brought it because I think that, like, I don't think that the notion of individuality is only a product of culture. And I think that there is a certain inherited value or inherited emergence for the notion of individuality from the survival instinct, that I have the ability to separate myself from you in order for me to keep existing.
But Matan, if I had survival instinct, I would not engage in contact improv with you.
Why not?
Because I get killed. Because until I open up what is possible for me as a human being, as engagement, as physical communication, physical involvement, and as a mentally involved skill, until I gain skills, if I remain as an individual, it's too darn dangerous. But when I am not a zebra and I'm not working, I mean, the contact, what Steve did in the creation of magnesium was he was interested in reflexes. The zebra is acting reflectively as an individual. Absolutely, I agree. Run away. But we are not zebras. We are human beings. And as human beings, we are self-reflective, and we start to learn possibilities of embodiment. To me, embodiment is a technology, I have to tell you. How you are embodied is a technological practice. It is not merely reflexive. So in the responses, you can be you can have reflexes, so you can be reflective in your actions. You can be reactive, which there's a time delay there. You can be responsive, there's a time delay there, and you can be communicative. There's no time delay there. So reflexive action is what a zebra does, but a human being, we've got more choices. And
yeah, totally. And Anita, I don't want to come across as somebody who is like arguing that no, we are individual and nothing more, because I agree with you. And
yeah, of course I do.
And I think that.
Thank you.
I bring it up because I think that, that it's more complex than just like, the hell with neoliberalism and then we can get rid of it. I think it's more complex than that. And then like,
I would agree with you.
And then what I'm interested is in this magnificent differentiation that you've just did there with the different skills that human being can have in relation to events. So how do you apply it in the context of that the person or the situation is competitive, is that the person that I'm communicating with wants to harm me or has like a negative intention toward me, or maybe they don't have negative intention, but I don't desire that, because we see it,
Let me tell you, I hope that I have skills that you have of the martial arts. Because I have to be able to create boundaries. Absolutely, I have to be able to create boundaries. I want to suggest that that's a very important thing. I need to be able to say to create to somebody, to understand when somebody's attention is placed in a way that is unhealthy for me. I want to be the first to know it. I want to be the first to say no. So I'm in complete agreement with you. It's just, there's no just about it. That is a fact. And permissions, absolutely. What are you asked me about what underlies contact? Goodwill underlines contact. The value of goodwill for all. You do not enter a dance without goodwill for your partner. or your partner's goodwill for you. That is essential. Nothing happens until that is the base.
Yeah, this is a. It leads to a very, I think, to a difficult area that I notice that is present also nowadays within the culture in general, and in particular in contact improvisation as well. Because you've mentioned like the way you talk about attention and what is happening, and maybe I want to quote something that I read in one of your papers that I think that is maybe will lead me to this kind of next question. As selves become more spatially fluid by choice, we in CI no longer experience clearly defined and independent body minds. And I think that this is a phenomenon that everybody who had some profound experiences in CI can identify, that there is this kind of blurriness of boundaries between you and your partner, between the pair and other pairs, between the space and the dancers, between the musics, if there's live music, definitely between the music and the dancer, and there is this expansion. But at the same time, there is a strong shout for consent and for clear boundaries. And it feels for me almost like the practice of contacts pulls us towards this multiplicity, but it doesn't offer us very maybe clear tools in relation to boundaries, as in martial art. In martial art, it's so clear. Like that's the thing you practice from day one. Right. How to say, stop, that's enough for me. Yeah. Also, it's codified in martial art. You can tap. I can tap on your body and it means enough.
Right.
So how do you address it within your practice, how you address it?
It took me really years to address it, I have to say, because I didn't consider it. Yeah, I'm talking about in the 70s. In the 80s, maybe into the 80s. And then in the 80s, it started to be a concern. And I realized that the clarity that I was coming to meeting other beings was not necessarily the clarity that they had. I remember one young man coming up to me and saying, "How do I deal with the fact that I get a hard-on when I'm dancing with people?" And I really didn't know how to deal with that at the time. It was shocking to me. I think I was horrible. I think I just was dismissive of him. But he was asking a genuine question. And so the question is, in that moment, what could I have taught him that he didn't know? And what I could have taught him was that the body as a mind, it organizes according to where attention is placed and how it is placed. And that when you attend one way, it will take you to one direction, and when attention gets placed another way, it gets placed in another direction. So instead of making this young man bad or wrong or dismissing the question altogether, because I would have preferred that I had taught him how to organize his attention in a way that was supportive of the dance, not supportive of so much sensuality that it became sexual. The issue with contact dances and contact interests becoming sexual is that the second that starts to be the goal, or even sensuality becoming the goal, you stop asking the questions that can be asked about what else is possible, about what it is to be a conscious being, about what it is to be a mind body that is not a mind and a body, but is in one action, both. So how do you, I'm not directly addressing this, how do you? And so let me try and address that, which is, how do you deal with consent, the need for consent? And the need for consent is in every touch that you have. every touch. You feel when I dance with somebody, I'm reaching to feel somebody's attention. I'm not just reaching to feel where their where their body's going. I'm reaching to know their mind, body, which is their attention. I'm reaching what is of concern to them. What are they noticing? What do they not get? What are they? And the second I feel there is absorption or interest that is has only to do with them, and I'm not included in it. When I'm not included in the conversation, I'm out of there. I'm out of there. I say no. So teaching that ability to that high sensitivity to move at the speed of your partner's attention when you're dancing with them, so that you know their attention, so that you understand what they're understanding. That's critical. To do that, you have to be able to move at the speed of your own attention, which, you know, is a really critical skill. But the other critical skill is to be able to move at your partner's speed of your partner's attention. And then you're dealing with, you know, if you say no, it's done. Right? Was that an answer that helped?
I mean, it gives me a clear direction, and I can relate to it from, you know, I've watched a short documentation about a blind grappler, guy grappling, like the art of, you know, any martial exchange that doesn't include striking, but just manipulation of body. So basically using touch to control your partner. And it was interesting that, you know, he cannot see his opponent, so he has to touch them. And I think that it was amazing to see what different sensitivity he has discovered in comparison to people who need to rely on the visual, that first you have to see, you have to interpret it, and then you have to react. And I think that this, for me, is maybe kind of a tangible line to the direction that you're offering about communing and expanding into your partner in order to be able to not to be separated. And if you can tap into that, maybe then you can feel the separatedness from your partner's side.
Exactly.
And then you can say, now is the time to say no.
Exactly.
Because he's not with me.
Exactly.
And if he's not with me, he cannot be considerable about my needs and about...
Exactly.
But how do you train it? Like, give me some, like,
so,
what is the...
So you,
how
first
do you
of all, you have to train that bodies are not just bodies, they're minds. So when you're doing a contact improv dance with somebody, you're dancing with a mind, a body mind. And so when you're moving and when you're making movement choices, that mind is critical to what's happening. What does that body mind understand? How is that body mind understanding it? That questioning, that research questioning, that inquiry that we were talking about at the very beginning of this conversation is critical to your understanding of and creation of this relationship. And so when I'm teaching contact improvisation, as I'm always doing on some level, when I'm teaching that attention is visible. You can see it. So I train people how to see attention. I train them that it's tactile. You can feel where attention is, and that as you're moving with somebody, your job is to inform your partner about where your attention is. So when partners are informing one another, not just about what they're doing, but about what they're attending to, then you get a different quality of touch.
Yeah, it sounds like something that demands so much time and space and attentiveness, and that it's very subtle. And in a way, you know, like jiu-jitsu, even though that the practice is to strangle your partner unconscious or break their limbs, it's much more safe than contact, because we are communicating on a very primal level. Okay, I do that, we stop. It's like, everybody can recognize that. I can shout tap and you hear and you stop. And I think that maybe what you're suggesting, if I understand it correctly, is that we do have the ability to get the same quality of like tapping on a very detailed way, but in order to get there, we have to also take some risks, because there would be possibility of misunderstanding along the way.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, when somebody's out for themselves and is self-absorbed, you get it immediately. It's pretty clear. It's pretty easy. When somebody's manipulating you, you understand it immediately in their touch. You can feel that manipulation, can you not? Doesn't take a lot of training to get that. When they have limited what is possible because they can't hear anything but themselves, you understand that immediately. So there's some pretty basic stuff that you can understand right off the bat that produces safety. The issue is training people to be constantly seeking to know what's happening with their partner. And you train that right from the very beginning of contact, not just what's happening with you. Because it's not all about you. It's about a relationship.
But I don't know if I agree with that, because I think that most of the problem that I've encountered personally and also by witnessing others is especially, there is this kind of typical, I think this is something I've seen in every scene I've ever been part of, and every city I visited, there is this kind of phenomena, mostly of, I would say, like there is a certain asymmetry between men and women there. There is a guy who his personal interpretation of contact improvisation implies something that is more in relation to sensuality, and that he preys on beginners that arrive and they haven't. And even though that I agree with you that it's very easy to sense when somebody manipulating you, they have zero skill to say no, and and then many catastrophes are happening.
So you're talking about beginners now. I'm
talking about beginners. So and this is where I see a very difficult tension to manage, because this is not a phenomenon that is happening in jiu-jitsu. Not many people arrive and they feel like, oh, I've been abused in a jiu-jitsu class when I arrived. It's not happening because, again, there is a codification, there is a desire to create. Yes, just get to the point. There is a desire.
I'm terrible about interrupting. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. I was born in Israel. I'm used to that. So, and so there is a very clear way of getting rid of that problem through codification. And I feel that in the contact improvisation, it's almost like kind of a taboo to codify, and to, every time somebody suggests a way of codification, everybody is alarmed because, oh my God, the freedom will be taken, or if we even just want to evaluate people across their level and saying like, yeah, like we should have different rules for beginners and advanced. No, it's not inclusive. And there I feel like there is so much problems.
Let me say, I think you're comparing apples and oranges, because you're comparing class to a jam. And a jam, people come from all these other dance experiences. Like what are the I'm blanking on the name of those dances where people get together. Ecstatic dancers come to contact because they see contact happen in their context, and they come to a jam. They don't go to a class. And if they were in a class, it would be a very different thing. So if you compare to class, you might understand that the teacher is in charge of recognizing that this individual is only concerned with sensuality and is not concerned with the well-being of their partner. If you're in a jam, that's a different circumstance. Now you have people that have no contact training coming in and moving around as if they were contactors, but without any of the background. And so that is an issue. That, I agree, is a real issue. Then they have never heard what the possibilities are and what is expected of them in a jam situation. And then they do, I agree, there needs to be codification.
I take your point but it's true, there is no place to comparison a class situation to a jam, but I also do a comparison that is in the level of the general culture, and there is an equivalent to a jam in the world of jiu-jitsu, which will be open mat. It's just people coming, practice, like improvising together in couples, or more or less. But there is a clear culture in jiu-jitsu that if you never took a class, you're not welcome in an open mat. You're just not gonna be there. And everybody, it's clear, like, sorry, come to beginner's class, get a grasp of what we are doing, and then maybe after some time you are ready. But in the contact jam, in the contact improvisation, there is a certain, I think, terrific, that we are being terrified by the idea that somebody will feel that they are not included, so that, like, okay, you've never gone to contact, you don't know what you're doing, still you're welcome to be part of us. And I feel that that's the biggest mistake. Like, we are doing harm for our own community by not saying, like, sorry, the door is not open yet. Please go.
I think I agree with you. I agree with you, Matan, because I mean, I have found it very, very disturbing to have people join a contact jam. I mean, I very often don't go to jams because I don't want to get hurt. Why? Because there's people that just throw themselves around mindlessly, not without a clue. And I think that I think I would agree with you completely. There needs to be, in a contact jam, the determination. You are absolutely invited to come if you've been taking class. And at the point that your teacher says, go to jam. Go to jam. But don't just walk in from ecstatic dance and try and teach contact improv or do a contact improv. And I've seen ecstatic dancers who thought they could teach contact without having even taken a class. No, really. Let me show you how to pick a girl up. Let me show you how to pick a girl up and throw her around. And that is what has been considered contact.
There's nothing that pisses me more off than this silly comparison. I've seen it in several places, like that people say, so what's the difference between ecstatic dance and CI? And I'm like, where to begin? But like what you pointed, and I think that this is again, and I'm not, I don't want you to get the feeling that I'm trying to kind of point contradictory things because you personally, but I see this contradiction in me as well. Is that in order to get to a point that it will be a very clear practice that, beginners, they just don't come to jams because it's not safe for the advanced, it's not safe for the beginners. There has to be some codification of what does it mean to teach contact and what are the rules, let's say. But this will completely go against the spirit of what I also in favor of what you're describing, this kind of, you gave birth to something and now you let it live. You don't try to control it. And, there is, the contact improvisation is a one-of-a-time phenomena that I haven't seen anything like it, because of the fact that you don't have this teacher training and hierarchies, and then it's like a website and you read the founder and the senior teacher next to it. You don't see all this crap. You just see, life. Yeah. Contact improvisation is an expression of life.
And it does mean there will be mistakes. It does mean there will probably be more mistakes in contact than there will be in something that has that hierarchical structure. And mistakes will show up as people getting hurt. And then something has to change. So it is wise I think there could be jams where everyone is invited. Come and figure out what this is. But there do need to be jams where it's limited to people that have trained skills. I just think that both are possible, and and the jams in which beginners are welcome is maybe where they go to explore and see if that's something that might interest them. But that's better taken care of in a class. And those jams definitely need to have some controls to keep people safe, to keep everyone safe, and to keep out predatory action. There are predators that are attracted to contact jams. And those predators, I mean, that means somebody that's there just to get their sensual pleasures met in a way that is usury, not a way that is generous, a generosity of spirit with each other. That when the other person is not included, there's a problem.
Yeah, I would be very interested in spending some time with you in the studio and going into a physical inquiry of those concepts, because my journey with contact was starting really more from the physical technical. I would say, like, I went through first the contact circus style, of learning all the moves, and now in my own practice, because again, like, there has been so many evolution already in this short time that I'm doing it. What I am trying to cultivate is something I call communication practice.
Exactly. That's why I'm teaching relational. Well, I haven't told you anything about the ISSC, the Institute for the Study of Somatic Communication, which is something that I've created, which is and I've been working with Daphne Erdur as a co-director, although she hasn't really been participating much this year. But this year has been a unique year, we have to say. But it is a series of dance ensembles, all of which are contact improv based, but they're ensemble practices. And they are research bodies in a more technical sense of research bodies to study how it is we communicate somatically. And that gets back into that whole thing about attention and communion.
Mm.
So yeah, I'm with you there. I'm totally with you there.
It will be really first interesting to understand how to have access to your findings and the things that you're discovering, and also, like, I know when I'm teaching, so I wonder how would you react to that? Because when I go to this thing that I call communication practice, and I kind of outline like really general things, I always tell to everybody who comes to study with me that I cannot teach them how to communicate. I can give them a space where they can practice communication, but it's something that you have to teach yourself, and that it's not something that I have the capacity externally to guide you to do. What do you think? Would you agree with it, or you think that there is an ability to really, I don't know if the word instruction is not the right word, but to, how would you say, like, can we teach communication?
Well, yes. You can set up circumstances in which communication exists. And for me, those circumstances require, if I'm seeking to move beyond responsive, if I'm seeking to move beyond body language into the somatic, so that it's somatic communication, not body language communication. If I'm moving into that somatic level, I need to teach people how to move their physical and attentional capacities, the physicality of their attentional capacities. And when I start to teach the physicality of their attentional capacities, it starts to interrupt their sense of themselves as a skin sac. They start to have to become spatial. And when they become spatial, that starts to move them beyond simply a knowledge of self as what's inside, but self can start to have a sense of sensing, self as a sensing. So when self is a sensing, then what you sense, you are already, instead of it thinking of training listening, you train, what are you knowing? What have you, what's present to you in this moment? So you're teaching presence in a sense. And that knowing is communication. That is when I've received the message. I've got it. So that's listening. That knowing is I've got it. Learning to speak physically and attentionally, that also is a training. And where we have where I attend, I can learn to intend. But attention makes intention possible. Without attention, there can be no intention.
So from that perspective, is CI a certain form of communication, or is CI a space to train communication? Because I do like when I came from basketball, that's my first thing that I was doing for many years, and there is clearly like tons of communication happening on very different levels. And also now when I'm doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I do kind of separate for myself, or I experience different way of communication. And I wonder what's significant about CI is the type of communication, or the ability to actually also train communication as a meta task, and not as like a specific skill that could be applied in contact improvisation.
I think, well, I can only speak about how I teach. And I teach communication immediately as a core and basic practice. So it's not really it is communication. It's that responsibility. And so if I'm dancing with somebody and I'm speaking with my attention, I'm speaking with my physicality, and they don't hear it, they don't get it, it tells me a lot about who I'm dancing with. And the speed of their response tells me everything. And teaching people to be sensitive to that, to recognize when they're being responded to and when they're not, is really, that's important. Important because it determines what choices you make. Where are you going to go? What are you going to do? Are you going to continue this dance? If I'm up on somebody's shoulder and they don't get it, they don't get certain communications I'm giving them, man, I want down, and I get down fast. I go heavy, get down. I stop communicating.
Funny, that's where I see my jiu-jitsu background come into application when I'm dancing. Which that when I don't want, when I get, because I don't know, like I've had a lot of sometimes surreal experiences in relation to how people feel that the touch is kind of welcome to touch my body in ways that was not always so clear for me. And I think that the ability to generate space, because that's, I think, something that is almost, or I've seen it less present in the teaching of CI, the notion of negotiating distance, but it's a core practice in martial art. Like asking yourself, what is the distance between me and my partner, and what is the distance that I want to, like, how do I negotiate it? Do I want my partner very close to me? Do I want them very far away? And of course, there's also like a multiplicity of skills of how to generate the desired outcome. So yeah, I said it like when I feel like that somebody, could be that I'm on the shoulder of somebody, or that somebody's on top of me or whatever, and I feel that there is lack of listening there. So I sometimes take the choice to retreat into my individuality and say like, okay, so now I will place a clear boundary between us to be clear about where we are. Yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly what I would do. Exactly. I become heavy. I stop trying to communicate. I get off. I get down. I make space.
And I wonder how would and this would be maybe a question to the next time I invite you, because we have already been talking for very long. And
my God, we have so much to talk about.
Yeah.
God, you are so great to talk to. Really great to talk to. I love it.
Is how do we take these skills and apply them into communication that is beyond the dance space? Because man, I feel that it's such a challenge nowadays. Makes me really pessimistic.
Oh, please, no. Okay. Well, it is hard times, and I can understand feeling pessimistic. But I think people like you, like me, are seers of possibilities. The ISSC is about the future and training across disciplines, not leaving it just in dance. That's the purpose of the ISSC. So, yeah, we've got those concerns, and there I can see a dance that is well off of the stage, that is a research practice to train what the potentials for embodiment are. And here I have to explain the embodiment. When I use that word, I may use it, and it sounds as if I'm speaking about a singular thing, but it's not. There are many, many embodiments, and understanding the variety of embodiments, being able to understand what is the person I'm dancing with, how are they embodied? What do they understand as a human? Themselves as a human. What do they get? And what are their possibilities? They're huge and varied and cultural. And we want the dance. Who can explore that realm better than dancers? I don't know anybody. Martial arts, contact, and particularly contact-based dancers, not necessarily limited to contact, but extended into a full range of movement. Martial arts, contact is very different than the martial arts, but it uses absolutely similar principles. The principles that underlie contact are the principles that underlie the martial arts. The purposes are totally different. When I touch you as a contact dancer, my job is to tell you where I live, to tell you where my relationship is with the earth, where my balance is, where my attention is. That's my job. If I'm touching somebody that wants to damage me, they have no right to any of that, and I will not give it to them. But I'm not a martial artist. But we're dealing with the same phenomenon of possibility.
Yeah, no, it's really fascinating. It's like I can keep looking at it, I guess, for the rest of my life on this interaction between different ways of understanding being being a mind body. How you say it in your own words, Nita. I want to give you some space to share with the audience where they can meet you, or what are the places that they can keep following what you're doing. And I mean, because I'm sure that many people would be curious to, or to have maybe a more direct experience of the things that you're talking about. So what the future holds for you?
Great. Well, probably the easiest way to get in touch with me is Facebook at this moment in time. Also, Instagram is another way to connect with me. But my website, I've been very slow to reconstruct it and get it up there, because what I am involved in has changed so many times over this last year. How I'm doing it, what I need that website to do for me and for others, how we can connect. But if people please persist and go to nitalittle.com, it will come up. I will get that done in the next couple of months. Get that website up there, so that will contain everything. But in the meantime, Facebook, Instagram, nitalittle.com, or Nita Little at Facebook, or Nita Little. I think it's called Nita Little Official, or Nita Little Generating Joy. So I've done a lot of teaching under the rubric of generating joy.
I will definitely link all this stuff. So this is going to be present. And is there any, at the moment, public teaching learning opportunities that are open for the public with you?
Absolutely. I'm just about to start another composing Emergence, which is a composition class. I always have an ongoing, it's a drop-in class called Relational Intelligence at Home. And just write me, Nita Little, at mac.com, or NL Generating Joy, nl.generatingjoy at gmail.com. That will get you to me. And the class is on Wednesday mornings from 10 to noon Pacific time, which is usually something like 7 o'clock European time, or 6 o'clock in the UK. It might right now be 6 o'clock European time. I'm losing track. I think it might be. It's 7 or 8 hours different. Right now it's 7 hours different than the UK, 8 hours different than Europe. In the winter, it's 9 hours difference. But lots of Europeans come to that class. I will be, those are my two primary ongoing classes. I'm doing all kinds of stuff in other circumstances as well. But I'm also going to be teaching a mind and motion class that's for non-dancers, with Gretchen Spiro eventually at the end of April.
Yeah, that sounds really nice, Nita, and thank you. I will make sure that it's accessible for everybody who is listening to the podcast. And I can really recommend from my whole heart, from my own experiences with you, that if people have the curiosity, take the step and go and learn with Nita. And I'm sure they've recognized that you're awesome if they've been listening by now, but I can also say that it translates into the studio, because it's not always like that. Some people have great ideas, but the application is not great. But at least what I remember, you really moved something positive in me when we met. I can really recommend, and I want to thank you for coming here and sharing this time with me. I really feel blessed by this opportunity.
Thank you so much. You have incredible questions. I really love your thinking. I love your physicality. I have to say, Matana, I have loved your dancing. I mean, really loved watching you move. And I'm so happy you're doing these podcasts because you're clearly an interesting thinker as well. So I really appreciate all of it. It's joyful to me.
Thank you very much,
for
Nita.
us to be in communication.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So yeah, like you can expect a re-invite to this space in the future, and until time brings us again together. Thank you very much, Nita.
Okay.
If you want to see more precious and insightful moments, make sure to check our short clips playlist. To see longer interviews, check out the full episode playlist just below it. And to be notified for all future videos, click the subscribe button and don't forget to hit the notification bell. See you on the next episode.